all make sure we are in the right place at the right time. This is DEI, not just a moment, but a movement. Is everybody where they want to be? Okay. Before you two start, I do want to say I think we are really fortunate to hear the two of you speaking this morning. I know the good work that your agency is doing. I've heard Naquana speak. I haven't heard you, Stacy, but I know of your work. So I think we're really blessed to have you as our presenters this morning. And I think we are really fortunate to have this layered on top of the last session we just heard. So with that, take it away.
Well, like Peggy said, I'm Naquana from Orion Family Services, and this is Stacy, and we're going to get started. So kind of what you can expect today out of our time together is, we're going to have a little bit of discussion of like what catapulted DEI into the spotlight, what exactly does it mean and why it's important and necessary for your organizations. Give you a little background of who Orion is, what do we do, what we look like, and who we serve. How we started our journey, because it's very interesting how we started our journey into DEI work. And I know if you guys attended the plenary yesterday morning, you probably heard the word implicit bias being talked about. So we're going to go into a little bit about implicit biases, what does that mean to you and your organization. And we're going to have you guys do some implicit association test assessments today and break out into some smaller groups and review those things and some ongoing changes and the next steps and what to consider when starting out. And we also do have some resources, some books that your organizations could get into and reading. So hopefully the PowerPoints are made available so that you guys can see that. So Stacey?
Okay, so I love to tell stories. And so I really felt I wanted to tell you guys about Father Mcshane and the inspiration, who he is, the inspiration that he has provided. And it'll support, hopefully, and set a tone for some of what we're going to explore today. So, Father Joseph Mcshane is the president of Fordham University, a Jesuit college, a university in New York City. My daughter is a student there. That's how I know about Father Mcshane. I can't talk about him and tell the story without, I just sort of spontaneously flip into an Irish accent, so when that happens, just roll with it. The funny thing is that, like with a name, like Father Mcshane, don't you just think he should speak with an Irish accent? He doesn't. He's like from New York, so he speaks like a New Yorker. But I heard this story before I had a chance to actually meet him and hear him speak. So in my brain, I have created him as an Irish-speaking guy. So Father Mcshane is a legend. I really encourage you, Google him. He's retiring this year. He's been foundational in the imprint he's left at Fordham. During COVID, he every week sent out really like his sermon because he couldn't preach. So he just wrote it and sent it out to everybody. And it was really a lifeline. When my daughter was looking at schools, she really wasn't sure where she wanted to land. And she heard him speak. And this is what hooked her. He said, students that come to Fordham University, they come here because they're bothered. And during the 4 years that they're here, we keep them bothered. And when they leave here bothered. And do you know why? It's because it's bothered people that make a difference in the world. So, DEI and all of the stuff that we're living through, I appreciated Nikki saying, this morning it's kind of sophomoric. Sophomoric? Sophomoric. That we're maybe overusing that term. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. I think that there's such a continuum for people about where they are on this journey. Some are further along than others. And the acronym makes sense and it's easy to wrap your head around as a starting point. The work, though, is bothersome, right? If we're really doing it right, if we're really looking at ourselves and we're really moving into those spaces, we should be feeling bothered. So our hope today is that maybe you guys will feel a little bothered as we move into some of this stuff. And if you do, that's okay. So, thank you.
So Sandra Bland, she died in police custody under suspicious circumstances on July 13th, 2015. Philando Castillo, murdered in front of his young child and girlfriend during a traffic stop, July 6th, 2016. Elijah Mcshane, murdered by police, was given a lethal dose of ketamine to calm him, and he died on August 30th, 2019. Atiana Jefferson, murdered by police on October 12th, 2019, as she played Xbox with her nephew. Ahmaud Arbery, murdered while running on February 3rd, 2020. Breonna Taylor, killed during a no-knock warrant by police on March 13th, 2020. And then May 26, 2020, not just the country, but the world was captivated as we watched for 8 minutes and 46 seconds what could only be considered a modern-day lynching, as the life of George Floyd was taken before our eyes. Many of us stood in shock. Many of us did not know what to do. Many did not know how to respond. Soon after, the world as we know it erupted. We're already in the middle of a pandemic, and now we're in another pandemic, racism. But we've always been in that pandemic. It's been around for centuries, but now here it is coming to the forefront as the video of him losing his life and calling out for his mother is eerily reminiscent of what we thought of what happened when Emmett Till was taken from his home as he called out for his mother. So the world was just screaming and crying, what do we do? So it erupted. Protests sprung out all over. Some like to call them riots. I don't call them riots, I call them protests. There was looting, what some would call, but that was, trying to take away from the forefront. How this all ties in is because when this came to the screen, people didn't understand. And then there was memes being sent around and people were saying like, oh, they deserve what they're getting because of this, and companies were then firing people because, oh, this person said this doesn't align with our company, this doesn't align with our beliefs. And then the words came out, DEI. Where's your company's diversity? Where's your company talking about this? Then there was defund the police. And everybody started saying, well, if this doesn't align with you, what are you doing to make those changes? Because this is all in the forefront. So this tied into DEI. So what exactly is DEI? So we're going to watch just a little video. It's going to give us a little explanation about that. He told me how to do this. That's okay. No, I got to go backwards. Oh, there it is. There it is.
If you're not going to use the mic, I'm going to set it.
We have all heard that workplaces need to be diverse and inclusive. But what exactly do these terms mean? What is diversity?
Sorry.
How does equity fit into this picture? And why are these concepts important for the world of work? Diversity is very simply the presence of differences. For example, let's take a look at our closet. We have clothes of different colors from different places. There'll be clothes to wear in formal settings and those to wear at parties. In the context of workplace diversity though, diversity refers to the existence of individuals of varying gender, sex, religion, caste, race, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, education, physical abilities, socio-economic status, etc. Now the question is, why is diversity at work so important? The answer to this question is complex but broadly fits into 3 buckets: the business case, the social justice case, and the personal case. When organizations hire people from diverse genders, ages, backgrounds, and cultures, They are bringing a fresh array of perspectives to the table. Research has linked greater diversity to things that organizations care about, like better problem solving, more innovation, higher employee engagement, and increased productivity and financial performance. When there is a homogeneous group of people, chances are that their experiences and backgrounds will contribute to perspectives and skills that are the same or similar. A heterogeneous group of employees representing various identities and group memberships will contribute to unique perspectives and creative thinking. Then there are organizations that care about diversity because it aligns with their core values. They feel a responsibility to correct historical injustices and provide access and opportunities to otherwise marginalized and underrepresented groups in society. Socially responsible organizations even stretch their commitment to diversity beyond their workforce into supply chains, community engagement, future talent pools, and markets in general. Finally, some leaders and organizations recognize the unique challenges of those who have been excluded. With empathy, leaders work to reduce the impact of unconscious bias and prejudice on work decisions and communications. They understand the experience of stigmatization, imposter syndrome, stereotyping, and lack of access that exclusion and discrimination causes. Regardless of why, whether it makes business sense or if it touches us personally, organizations everywhere have started realizing that diversity is a fact, and the sooner we learn to leverage its potential, the better it is for everyone.
So I know a lot of times when we hear the word DEI, everybody knows it means diversity, inclusivity, inclusion. And so sometimes it's always like, well, what do you necessarily mean about diversity? And a lot of times people just think age, gender. But you know, diversity, like they said, includes ableism, LGBTQIA, so it's a wide diversity. If you look at the definition of diversity, it's, means more than just acknowledging and or tolerating the difference. It is a set of conscious practices that involve understanding and appreciating interdependence of humanity, cultures, and the natural environment. I think a lot of times we can go into our workplaces and say, we're diverse, we're diversity, we understand diversity, but do we really understand it? Is it really embedded in our practices, in our culture, like even in the languages that we use? I know one thing that we noticed when we were going through this, as we were starting to redo things, we used the words mother and father a lot in our paperwork. And a lot of the times the kids that we are working with aren't necessarily with their mother or fathers. It may be aunts, uncles, grandparents. Some of them are with teachers. So we even had to look at changing our language to say like caregiver, caretaker. A lot of our things said he, she. And as we know in this world, a lot of people, are identify as different, not even having a gender. So we had to go through and even look at that. Recognizing that personal, cultural, and institutionalized discrimination creates and sustains privileges for some while creating and sustaining disadvantages for others. And then when you do DEI work, you have to look at, is it equity versus equality? They're both entwined together, so you got to really understand the difference to know what you're going at. So the dictionary defines equality as the state of being equal in rights, status, and opportunity. As we know right now, there's not a lot of equality for some of us out here. So how do we get that equality? How do we bring that equality into our workplace? Equity can be defined as the means to achieve that equality. So that's how they go hand in hand with each other. Equity is also providing the same level of opportunity and assistance to all segments of society, such as races and genders. So inclusivity defined. The dictionary defines inclusivity as the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized, such as those having physical or mental disabilities or belonging to other minority groups. Inclusivity also means being aware of your, another key word here, implicit biases, which we'll review in just a bit. So when you're doing DEI work, the 5 pillars of DEI is data collection and gathering information. So first get started, you want to start gathering some information about your agency, you know, what you're doing, or whoever you're working with. Some education, you know, it's not enough to just jump in and say, we got DEI now. You know, you got to educate yourself about that and what does that actually mean, because the reality of it is that it's a lot of work. And there's a lot of people that will say, I'm going to put this into action, and then when you see the work, it kind of drizzles off, you know. And what we said in our agency, our hope is that we started our group, which you'll hear about is called IDEAB, and we want that group to dissolve eventually. Now I know you're probably looking at us like, you want that group to dissolve? Yes, we want it to dissolve because we want DEI to be so embedded in the work that we do that we don't need a separate group any longer, because it is part of our practice. So it's already embedded in there. You need representation and visibility. So I know there's a lot of agencies that will go out there and say, we maybe only have one person that identifies as BIPOC or LGBTQIA. So how do I have that representation and visibility if I don't have that in my staff? So we'll talk about that. Outreach and support your community. There are community leaders out there that you can be reaching out to that can help you with this. And dedicated staff. Your staff is going to be your key point, and you have to get them dedicated and brought into this as well. So why is DEI important? If we had DEI, we wouldn't have images like this that still exist. You know, I mean, it was just only during 2020 and 2021 that the images of Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben went away. And as we know, the Native American and the association is called Illuminatives. I would highly, if you guys are not familiar with the work that they do, highly look them up. They do a lot of work with Indigenous and Native American and culture representation. You know, they are going, you know, really hard about getting rid of sports teams and stuff, using this for their mascots and stuff like that, and having representation. They were very big in Standing Rock. So we want to make sure we don't, you know, this is actually still used in Hong Kong, this picture. So we want to make sure images like this no longer exist.
Okay, you want to just flip my slides for me?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so who's Orion? Here's our mission statement. We're dedicated to healing the minds and spirits of children and families. You know, we have many of our staff, as we've talked about in some of the other sessions, you know, that internal motivation to be here and do the work. You know, years ago in my faith-based leadership training, getting the right people on the bus is really important. We're blessed to have a lot of the right people on our bus. What we do, we're a small community-based mental health center that's anchored in Madison, Wisconsin. We also have offices in Monroe, Wisconsin, and Janesville, Wisconsin. I like to say that our staff kind of fuel up in the morning, like the Starship Enterprise. They fuel up and then they spew forth to do good in the universe. And our universe is pretty much southern Wisconsin. My father-in-law, being inappropriate for a minute, used to say, "You are just like shit in the barnyard. You are everywhere." And that is really what we are. We are everywhere. Here's the services that we provide. We have got a staff of about 50 people, so we are small but mighty. Here's what we look like. You know, we serve in our communities a couple of very urban communities and then a large rural population. But as you can see with our demographics, our board 100% white, lovely, retired volunteers, but we're really white. We do have gender split evenly, only 6 people on our board, 3 men, 3 women. Our staff, 93% white. Our consumers are 78% white, so it's still a large majority. But one of the things we've discovered is that best practice is you really want your staff to equally reflect the percentage of the population that you serve. So you can see, you know, we're a little bit short with our African American staff. You can see that we're short in our biracial staff. You can see we have no Asian representation on our staff. And you can see that our, well, we're not really, I guess currently, interestingly, Wisconsin has large communities of Native American people, but they tend to serve themselves, you know, on the reservation within their tribes. They generally do not engage externally with outside providers. You know, just looking at us, you know, we're not quite where we want to be. Again, largely female staff, so we really, and that's pretty common, I think, in our industry. Largely English speaking. We have 2 bilingual staff. But you can see that we have some work to do to balance out our staff so that we are more reflective, you know, of those we serve. And I think, you know, when you really learn and recognize this stuff, there's kind of an immediate reaction like, holy crap, we got to get going, we got to get moving on this. And really the discovery is this is really a process, and that as we move through it, we'll continue to get better at it. We'll build our muscles and our skills.
So, how we started our DEI journey, and I'm going to put Stacy on the spot here for a little bit. So, it was after everything happened with George Floyd. And myself and my coworker Michelle are the only 2 African American clinicians at Orion. And it was devastating. And it was devastating across the board, but it was a bit more devastating for a person of color to see that. And Stacy, it's like a mother figure to all of us too, reached out to send an email. And she was sending it intentionally at first to personally send one out to myself and Michelle, and then address the entire staff. But in doing that, Michelle's initials are MH, and so Stacy actually sent it out to the entire mental health team. But it was good because it opened the door to have a conversation that we weren't sure was going to happen. So after Stacy sent that email, responses started coming in from the staff. I didn't know if we were going to talk about this. How are we going to address this? How do we protect the 2 of you? How do we give you guys the space that you need? And in talking with my supervisor, Tia, we had supervision, and I cried pretty much the whole time. Because I also live in a town that is known as a sundown town in Wisconsin's Janesville. And it's also, you know, a nickname of it is called the Clansville. So I was, you know, also very scared and just worried about my own personal safety and stuff as well too.
What is a sundown town?
A sundown town is a reference back into civil rights time, where there were towns where African Americans would have to leave before the sun went down because your safety was at risk. And Janesville is, if you research it, Janesville is one of those towns that comes up.
And just pause and think about that, you guys. That's now. That's now. That is now.
Thank you.
So,
Go ahead.
obviously it's not still because you live there, but what is the diversity within the town?
Very low, and it is still, because by certain times at nights, they come out with their big trucks and their Confederate flags, and they're racing up and down the streets, and Kim, you know, works in there, so she's seen it as well too. So it still very much is out in your face like that as well too. When this was all going on, Michelle was out walking with her niece, and there was writings on the sidewalk, like just really racist languages just written on the sidewalk. If you're walking with kids and you look down and you're reading it and you'll see it. So it's still very much in your face. So after that email, there was an intentional discussion with the staff, with Michelle and I. And then we opened up that discussion with the mental health staff and our consultant, Armando Hernandez. And I will say that was probably one of the most powerful places to do that, because it allowed us to be vulnerable. And I kept saying to myself, ooh girl, you a soldier, have that strength. Which, you know, we all know there's that common myth of black women are so strong, we have to be so strong. Sometimes we need to be vulnerable. And when Michelle started crying, I lost it, and I was like, damn it, Michelle, we're supposed to keep it together. But it was an opportunity to really get that out there and have those discussions. and then also see how it was affecting, you know, the others that were around us. And then after that, we decided to have a task force, because we realized in the work that we do that we weren't necessarily always thinking about that. And one of the stories that I had told about that time is that, like Stacy said, we work in rural areas. And there was a time where we were looking at where was I going to shift to work at, because we were doing some rearranging. And we had a meeting. And in that meeting, my coworker at the time who was leaving said, she cannot serve this area because she will not be accepted here, and they may cause her harm. And I just remember crying, because I was like, are you kidding me? I'm here to help you, and this is what you're thinking. And we all we had the discussion that day, and then we kind of just kept going, you know. We never really came back to it. And so I brought that up too, because it's like, you know, I wonder, you know, if we would have came back to that, you know. So now we think about that. And then we connected with Percy Brown Jr., who is our consultant, and he consults with us on IDEAB. So this is just a small picture of our IDEAB group. And I'll have to tell you, when we got started with our task force, after that meeting and our staff development, we said, who all wants to be involved? I was just floored by the number of people that were like, yes, I want to be involved, I want to be involved, I want to be involved. You know, it's dwindled a bit now, and that's just simply because of people's ability and their bandwidth to be able to do things. We all understand that there's a lot going on. But the funny story is when we got in and we had Percy came in and we started coming up with all these ideas, and we're like, we have our first thing. And he goes, what is it? And we're like, we want everybody to watch American Skin. He said, whoa, whoa, whoa. He said, have y'all seen that movie? We said, yeah. And he said, are y'all trying to scare them? And we were like, no, but we think it's great. And you know, and so it was good to bring him in, because we were so gung-ho that he had to slow us down a little bit too. And I think that's what happens sometimes when people start doing DEI work and bring it in. It's like, we're all in, we're gonna throw it all in your face, and you gotta slow it down sometimes a little bit. So the first thing we did was came up with our mission statement. So we have Orion's mission statement, and we're like, well, what is our purpose of this group? You know, so we call ourselves Inclusivity, Diversity, Equity Advisory Board, because we're here to advise. But we're like, what do we stand for? So our mission statement is, we are a community striving to take a multifaceted, intersectional approach to address systemic inequities in order to cultivate comprehensive healing work at the individual, interpersonal, and structural levels. Then we also said, what are going to be our values? So we really broke this down as if like we wanted to have our mission statement, our visions, and our values. So our values is, we work together to actualize change individually in our communities and in our agency by motivating a shift from education to challenging norms, cultivating better living and work conditions, fostering connection and coalition building, and activating human rights and human dignity-based policies from an anti-racist perspective. So one of the first things we did was we had a staff development day. So as you can see in the pictures, and that's Percy in the corner, the makeup of our staff is, like Stacy said, mostly white, mostly women. But this was probably one of our more informing staff development days, because Percy really gave a lot of knowledge about history, and even some history in Wisconsin. Like, one of the things I never knew was at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, there was a Ku Klux Klan chapter, just like a regular Greek fraternity and sorority chapter there, you know, so it's pretty interesting. So some of the progress we've made in IDEAB, we have our staff development days. Some of the things we did at our staff development days is we reviewed our vision and value survey, and we put in some questions about where did we think we as an agency were at with diversity and including that in the work that we do and being able to talk about race and stuff. And the response was surprising. You know, there's a lot of people that felt like we had a lot of work to do, that we say we're diverse, but are we really putting that out there? I did my historical trauma presentation for the staff. We did the staff pronouns, very simple, easy thing, you know, something that we never thought about. And unbeknownst to us, there's a lot of people that use different pronouns than what we were referring to.
You say it's very simple, did you get a lot of resistance?
We got some, and I think what happened is then we, again, as we've been learning, as we've moved through this, that, you know, pacing, right, is important. And I think what we learned is that we needed to do a little more education. And so we took a few steps back and then really focus on educating folks, like why does this meaningful? What does it mean? And when you do that, what's the impact of just that simple thing, your pronouns, you know? And I think once that education happened, the people that were kind of freaked out relaxed, because I think once they could see beyond themselves, there was, oh, okay, I can be okay with that. And we also created the space that you don't have to do it, right? And so always leaving room for the folks that aren't there yet, right? And something I want to say, you know, what was really critical, I think, for our organization was the first conversation. Because what was happening is, you know, I'm connecting with, you know, my 2 clinicians of color, and what do you guys need, right? What can we do? And over here, a lot of the white staff who had stuff going on but didn't know what to do with it were coming to me going, I'm so glad, you know, you sent out that email. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do, right? And what Michelle and Nakwana were really experiencing was the deafening silence. And for them, you know, I thought we all were really a community and a family. And this has just gone down and nobody is saying a thing. And, you know, really having conversation on, you know, people don't know what to say. So really it became, how do we create a space where people can begin to talk about it? And that was the beginning of the development of IDAB. But it really took some preparation and it was good that, you know, as a small organization, that was a benefit for us, you know, that there was already familiarity, and so maybe we were able to move into some of those spaces a little more quickly. But it really required, you know, creating a safe space to begin to look at it.
And one thing we do know, and we'll go on that, is that we know that, you know, and we'll talk about that, but one of the things Percy said was there's the 20-60-20 rule. You know, there's 20% of the people that work with you that are wanting to do this, but not sure how to get into it. There's the 60% that are all in, I'm here, and there's the other 20% that are like, I'm not here for this, you know. And those were some of the things that he also talked about that we have to be aware of, because if we have that 20% of people that aren't in, we have to look at it and say, you know, are we able to have them do this work? Because could they be going out and doing harm if they don't believe in this? I want to highlight our book club because that was a very interesting thing, because we were trying to merge with our board. And being transparent, is like Stacy said, our board is all white, older. And so our IDAB was very much like, they don't understand this, you know. How are we going to form with them, especially because a lot of them did not feel connected to them. And part of that happened because of COVID, and those opportunities that we normally had to connect with them were not there. And so in forming the book club and stuff, you know, we wanted to do one book, and then Percy said to us, well, if you feel like they're not there, they may not be ready for that book that you're at right now. So that was another thing that we had to take a step back and look at, is that just because those of us in IDAB were like boots on the ground ready to go, there was a whole other group of people that may not have been at that level where we were at. So we had to scale back and say, okay, we're going to read this book. So we started with How to Be an Anti-Racist. And then we had other people starting with White Fragility to try to, you know, bring them up to where we were at, because the fear too was that if we jump in boots on the ground because, you know, we're at, you know, half a tank and you're only at a quarter of a tank, you're not going to want to get up there with us because we're too in your face, you know. And then we do movie nights, which is great. We do them over Zooms, you know, minus the technical difficulties. And then we always have discussions. One thing that we developed, which I would highly encourage everyone in their organizations to look at, is we have a DEI day. So what that is we have staff be able to take a day off from work and not use their vacation and go and be a part of things that support diversity, inclusivity, and equity work. So if that means, you know, you're going out and you're going to tour the Civil Rights Museum and having discussions, you know, or if you're out, you know, supporting a food pantry and stuff, that way you don't have to use vacation day, but you're going out in the community and doing that work. And it was met with so much like, oh my gosh, this is so great. I can't wait to do this. Can we get t-shirts, you know, and go out and do things as a team? Go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to ask, is that something that your staff did in small groups, or was it something that they kind of did individually?
It's
of
up.
what they
Yep, it's up to them.
felt called to?
Yeah, it's up to them. They can do it by themselves. They can do it in small groups. We've been doing little things in small groups, and like one thing we're going to be doing is working with a kitchen that prepares food and sends it, takes it back out to the community. So we're going to try to do that as a group and go and prepare the food and take it out to the community together. We provide them a calendar every month of events that are happening in or around our area so that they can choose to go to those events. Some are in person, some are virtual, and then they can use those days to go and do that.
And it's optional. It was really creative that we wanted to create some space where, again, that, you know, where you just talk in the talk or you walk in it. So creating a paid day where you can go in whatever way it's meaningful for you to go out and learn something or participate in something. And there are going to be people who take advantage of it, and there are going to be people who don't. But the door's open now, and, you know, we'll see what happens.
Go ahead.
The IDEAB,
Yes.
are they paid, or do you get paid
No.
for the time that you spend on all of this?
So, you know, no, we're not. This is all volunteer. So everyone that's doing this is very dedicated, and they carve the time out in their day. You know, we still seeing clients. Some of us are meeting while we're driving, you know.
If it's truly part of the values of your organization, you should be being paid for what you're doing. Because if this is truly a value of your organization, and it's truly mission and value driven, it is part of your job description, and you should be paid.
Where's my CEO right there?
It's happening on paid time.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Right,
Yeah.
it's on paid time. And people have had some adjustments made to workloads to try to compensate for it. But there are things that happen, the movie nights happen after work, so people doing that on their own time, you know, choosing to do it. So, but I hear you.
And all this organization and all this work and the conversation and developing this, that takes a lot of time and energy.
And our staff, they're doing it. They're very dedicated, and it has come up, you know, because a good majority of us are salaried, and there's some that are hourly. So we have had the discussion of how do we, you know, make sure the people that are hourly are, you know, are compensated for being during that time. And they are. You know, Stacy said, you know, when they're here during that time, they put this on there. That's work time. They get paid for it.
And I will say it's also, you know, we have subcommittee meetings, so the leadership, senior leadership, meets once a month as a subcommittee with IDEAB. So these are, you know, we're at a time where we're already asking a lot of people. We're all being asked to do a little bit more, you know, to make this work. And it is all voluntary, and the board is engaged in it as well.
And Stacy hinted at, and I'll get to your question, but Stacy hinted at an important piece that I wanted to say that I missed, is that when we did this group, we intentionally asked to not have any of the senior leadership be in that group. And the intentions behind that is that we wanted staff to be able to be open and be vulnerable. So we felt the pulse of the room, and they said, right now, I can say how I feel about, you know, FDEI stuff is really being done here. But I feel like if Stacy as our CEO or Jennifer as our CPO or someone from the board is in this meeting, I'm going to not be quiet. I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to say anything. And trust me, it was very hard for me to tell Stacy that, and it was very hard for Stacy to accept that we made this decision not to do that. But we needed to do that to get our sea legs going. We needed to do that to be able to have the growth. And then from that, that's where the subcommittee came, where there's a smaller portion of us meets with, you know, the senior executives and with the board and reviews, you know, some of the highlights from the meeting. And I do feel that if we hadn't done that, we probably would not have made the progress that we've made, because this, this is your boss. It is intimidating to be like, I felt like microaggressions were being done. It's intimidating to say that in front of them. So I think as you're doing that work, I know a lot of us in here are leaders, but don't feel offended if that group says, we don't want you here right now. It's not that, they don't care about you, it's just that we have to be able to be vulnerable and build up to be able to come in.
I think it's quite a sign of trust for Stacy or for you as a leader in the organization to say, I'm going to back out and let you have at it, and you'll tell me when it's time for me to come back.
Yes. And then we also did a SWOT analysis, which was probably one of the best things I thought we did. So it stands for Strength, Weakness, Opportunities, and Threats. So we did it under IDAB, and our board just recently did it. And then we're going to come together and look at it. And one of the things from IDAB that we realized was that we had a lot of issues with our mission statement, and we had a lot of issues with how we were presenting ourselves, because we serve a diverse population, but the things that were put out there, our website looked very white. Our language and our pamphlets and our consents and things that we used was very white, very heteronormative. So we were like, we got a lot of changes that we have to do too. So now we're going to watch a little video on implicit biases. I'm checking my time. So
About a half hour.
Half an hour. So should we just go to the IAT, Stacy? Because I think that's going to be really important.
Well, maybe, how many of you have done implicit association tests, IATs, Peggy? Yes? You're familiar with them? You're not? Familiar? Okay, so do you take it to the group. Do y'all want to watch a little video that explains what they're about? Or do you,
I can give you an explanation too.
Okay, because we want to be able to let you, do one or two of them.
Because they're really important. We did these with Percy Brown Jr. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. And he had us do this, and he had us do the gender one, the race one, and it was very eye-opening for all of us. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and give you guys a little video about what the implicit association test is, and then we're going to have you guys do it, and then break off with someone after you do it, and we have a couple of questions for you. So.
And you'll need your phones.
Yes, you will need your phones to
be
do
able
it.
to take them.
So the video's 6
You're
minutes
not
long, but we
biased,
won't watch the whole thing.
right? This free online test might tell you otherwise. The Implicit Association Test, or IAT, can reveal racial and gender biases you might not even know you have. Here's how it works. The test asks you to rapidly group a series of images and words. For instance, in one section of the Race IAT, you press a certain key whenever you see a white face or a positive word. You press another key if it's a black face or a negative word. And you have to react as fast as you can. In another section, the associations are reversed. White faces go with negative words, while black faces are grouped with positive words. It turns out that 70% of test takers, white and non-white, respond more slowly when grouping black faces with positive words. The test calls this an automatic preference for white people. Other IAT tests on subjects like gender and disability have also found pervasive automatic associations that mirror social stereotypes. Your IAT results may well surprise you. Indeed, most test takers would answer on a questionnaire that white and black people are equal, and men and women should have equal pay. And many of them honestly think so. We're not talking about extremists here, but people like you and me. So what might the IAT reveal about us?
We may grow in our...
So what we're going to do now, because this might take a little bit of time, so if you can see right here, if you can grab out your phones, and this is going to take you to the implicit association test. And we want you guys to do the race IAT, and So we're going to take, it shouldn't, so on the phone, it's a little bit different on the phone than what you're doing it on the computer. But you can do it on the phone, I practiced. So if you guys can go to that, and you have to agree to do it, so you have to click proceed, so agree to do it. And one of the reasons they asked you to agree to do it, because like they said, your results could be surprising. And then, should we just break them in the room or have them?
I would say just stay where they are.
Okay, so after you do it, just stay where you are, and then just, the person next to you, we want you to just answer those questions. So we're gonna give you guys about 10, 15 minutes. So were you surprised by the results? What did you notice as you were taking the assessment? How did you feel? How would you use this assessment and others in your workplace? And were you aware that everyone has implicit biases? So we want you guys to just take about 10 minutes. Go ahead. If anybody needs any help loading it up, I can come
And
around and
I
help you.
think if those of you that have done them, maybe want to do a different one.
Okay. Oh, you're on an iPhone.
So just go to a browser or whatever,
It's take
Safari or Chrome.
Oh, take test.
So I'm not finding a race IAT, I'm
It's
finding
there.
Arab Muslim, light skin, dark skin, physically disabled.
You just scroll down.
There you go.
I'm still Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
And if those of you that have done them, if you've done the race one, do a different one. Pick which one you want.
Oh, I was ready.
Uh-huh.
I got that.
Okay. Oh, I hear. I'll get you there quicker.
I don't see one that says race on that. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
I wish to proceed.
Yeah, because I saw the skin tone.
It should be my character taking audience and stuff come out.
There you go.
Anyone else? Let's say Google. Oh, okay.
And then it should autofill with the take test page.
It's not.
It starts autofilling.
It is as smart as a person who is operating it, and we all know she's okay. .edu.
Get so nervous when you test. I know, I'm trying to read way up there and this little print here.
Well, move up here, Victoria, move up.
So you have to wish to proceed, and then you're going to take the race one. There you go.
And then I can just backslash again. And take a test. But mine-
Select your test.
And what's
Take a
test
test
do you
of
get?
HHSM.
I'm right here.
I'm on the site, but I don't see what that says I'm supposed to see.
I wish to proceed.
At the bottom, there's a donate button. I'm not finding this agree.
Oh, yeah, because you're in the race.
Oh,
Race IAT. Wish to proceed. And then scroll down to the race one. Scroll so after my birth year, we're in trouble.
I'm supposed to think. I need caffeine. Well, that too.
Yeah, so as you get to the end, you'll see your results. Yeah, so.
So I know some people probably are still working on it, but we'll keep going through. We'll give a few more minutes, and then we'll just discuss all together for the sake of time. For those, we'll give a few more minutes to go through that.
As you finish up, this is a publicly accessible site. You may, be interested in doing more of these on your own, or thinking about taking it back to your organization and implementing it. We just finished our last book, which was called Blind Spot, which is something I really recommend. The book really is about implicit bias. And there are tests attached to the book. And then we just did some additional tests as we moved through the book to just evaluate and move through, each of us. And really, most of the IATs on there we've completed.
Yeah, it's called Blind Spot, the Hidden Biases of Good People. Because as we all know, implicit biases, they're good people. That doesn't necessarily indicate racism. So, was anybody, I know some people are still doing it, but we're gonna issue of time. Was anybody surprised by their results? Anybody want to share?
Yeah, pleasantly surprised, because I had taken this about 5 or 6 years ago. I still failed the test, but I failed less.
Okay.
So you see your progress. Yeah.
But
God's working on it.
There you go.
I don't like that term, you fail the test. It makes you aware, but it's not, you don't
I don't care to fail. I
pass or
failed the test.
fail.
Yeah.
That's my language.
Okay, yeah.
it's not, it's really more about the discovery, and I think for many, the surprise, right? That like, I didn't realize, right? So that feels like a failure, right? Like for most of us moving through this work, right, we think we're open-minded, right? We don't think we're really biased, you know, but we all are, right? And so that it's so counterintuitive to how we think who we should be. So the discoveries can be unsettling,
They are unsettling.
right?
They are.
Yeah.
Peggy?
I had taken the racial one probably 6 or 8 months ago and found out I was implicitly biased toward white people. Today I took presidential preference, and for some reason I am implicitly biased toward President Roosevelt over President Biden. And that surprised me.
Interesting.
Yes, it is. Because I really like Biden.
Interesting.
I'm slightly biased, so
Okay.
actually, that feels good to me, although I know there's work to do, to know, you know, to let go of those biases I still have. But it's been a long journey.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
I think the strong thing to know about that is everybody is going to have biases, whether you realize it or not, just recognizing that. Because if you can recognize it, then you can, you know, put effort into really focusing on, maybe I could change that somehow, you know.
And Kim, who's currently in our NOLA, is also part of IDAB, so she works with us on it as well too. so.
My results were completely different than the last time I took them.
Really?
Yes, they were exactly the opposite.
How long ago did you take it?
We did that in September.
Yeah, September.
Wow.
But
You've
yes,
done
like-
a lot of work. You've done a
Yes.
lot of work, that's great.
So like Stacy said, we just finished The Blind Spot, which that's one of the books I put on the resource list. Highly, it's a very easy read, opens your eyes to a lot of things. Any other results anyone want to discuss? Okay. So what should your agency do next? You know, I know right now there's probably a lot of movement. There's some people that are probably a little like, oh, DEI even more. Call it, you know, you can change the name. We call it IDAB. We love it. I know some people are like, IDAB, but it's what we came up with. But the first thing you want to do is just start by reviewing those pillars. You have to get those pillars in place first too. And the biggest one is the dedicated staff, because you could do DEI all you want, but if you don't have staff to support you, if you're just one person, you know, you can't do this ride alone. Gather information about your workplace and the consumers that you serve. Connect with local leaders. I can't stress that enough, especially if the makeup of your agency does not reflect who you're serving. Connecting with those local leaders that can give you the insight of what it is to be a BIPOC. One thing we also do is we have 2 consultants that consult with our mental health staff, and we actually have an African American female that's doing it too. So that was like a first for Orion overall, right? Because we had Armando, who identified as Puerto Rican, so we had that, but never had an African American female. So we have an African American female, and then we have Percy, who consults with us for IDAB, and he consults with the board, and he's been really hands-on with us with working on how we're going to change our language on things and slowing us down when we trying to put the cart in front of the horse when we're trying to get too far ahead with our DEI work, saying, you know, slow it down a little bit, you're going to get there.
So I just want to give you a time marker. You got about 5 minutes.
Okay, so again, what else to consider starting out? The 20-60-20 thought, which I talked about. Staff makeup, mission, visions, and value statements. Board redesign. I'm not telling you to get rid of your board, but just think about when you have outgoing people, be more cognizant of who you're looking at to bring in, because you want your board to look like your people. And as we all know, our boards are aging, so think
And
about that.
you have to get board engagement,
Mhm.
right? Because if you're going to start making changes on the board, you want your board to be on board with those changes, right? So we've been very fortunate to get them engaged in this work. They've been open to it, and they're learning a lot.
Attending a lot of things. Books to read. Started out with, I love this book, So You Want to Talk About Race, is a great one. The Inclusive Leader, I've been reading that right now. The Inclusive Mindset.
So going back real quick,
Yes, ma'am.
if you're starting a book club, what book would you suggest for just starting out, very white suburban group of people?
So from our consultant Percy, he suggested starting off with white fragility.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what our board started off with, and we started off with how to be an anti-racist. And then the other option was, why are all the black kids sitting together at the lunch table?
Yeah.
So those were the three options that he gave
Okay.
us to read.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
And then lastly, some resources that we use for this presentation.
And one thing I would say is that I think, you know, it's been really valuable to have an outside consultant leading us through this. This is tricky stuff. And, you know, as a white person, I think we often rely on our clinicians of color, you know, our staff of color. And I think, you know, really the discovery is we cannot depend on them to lead us through this work, right? We need to walk alongside them. We need to lead ourselves. Having an outside consultant who's got expertise and can help with pacing, you know, it's been really critical. I can't say enough about that, and we were very fortunate to get connected to Percy. And he's, you know, we're working with him for 2 years. We made a commitment right now for 2 years to be just, you know, purchasing his wisdom as he leads us through this. But also really, we've created a team now that is reflective of our organization. And we really are benefiting from that 20% of the community that are all on board and working on that 60% in the middle, right? And then the 20% that are just never going to buy in, we're just not worried about them, right? They're either going to come or they're not, but we know where we want to go. So.
And the thing I will end it on too is that one thing that Percy said, because we oftentimes compared ourselves, I don't want to say compared, but there's another agency in our area that is, I'd probably say 85, 90% BIPOC. And we're just like, oh my gosh, you know. And I know, like, sometimes I'm pretty sure Stacy probably worries, are they going to come get Daquan and Michelle, you know? But one thing Stacy said was, but Percy said was, you don't have to be 80 to 90% BIPOC to do this work.
What do you mean? By people of color? Okay.
BIPOC, yeah, person of color. You don't have to have your agency look like that to do this work. You can have that education and that support from your community leaders and do just as good of a job as an agency that is 80, 90% black, brown, indigenous people, and you could be 5% people. You could do just as good of work because you're going to bring in that education, you're going to have that support, and your staff is going to be able to do it because they're going to go in and say, I know I'm white, I have some advantages that you will not have simply because of color of my skin, but we're going to do this work together, and we can do that.
I have a question. The SWOT, you know the SWOT analysis? Are they supposed to, when you ask for that, do you ask them to be anonymous, or do you want people to identify themselves when you do this analysis?
So we broke down into groups within it, and then we came back and shared it together.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so it wasn't necessarily who said what, but it was just
Okay.
reports from the group.
All right.
So, anybody have one more question and then we'll move to close?
I hate to dominate, but if you're going to get a consultant, I mean, how do you seek out a consultant? DEI consulting?
Well, there are tons of resources out there
Okay.
now, for sure. You know, we kind of stumbled into Percy. He's in our community, very prominent, and Naquana was at a training in which he was on a panel, and she just reached out, and we are blessed.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
And my guess is if you contacted Percy, he may have
mhm.
a network
People
of
in our
people
area.
too.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so-
Okay.
Brenda, I can give you his information if you want to reach out.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
let's begin by thanking our presenters.